Hey folks, Super B here, coming from the shop once again. A little bit of an update, both on the CJ7 restoration and the stroker motor. We've decided we're going to have to put a valve cover spacer on this engine, and I wanted to do that before we proceeded with any other work. And the reason for the valve cover spacer is we've got Harland Sharp 1.7 to 1 ratio roller rockers installed, as well as a high lift Mopar purple cam, and my concern is with the rocker arms hitting the baffle in the valve cover. A little history here: when you run roller rockers, non-adjustable roller rockers in a Jeep 4-liter base engine, if you're running the 91 to 95 cast aluminum valve cover, they generally will clear without any issues. If you're running the 96 and up valve cover, they will hit the oil baffle. And short of removing the baffle, the only other solution is to space out the valve cover. So we've decided I don't want to remove the oil baffle. The 96 and up baffle is actually a very good design, works very well. So we're going to put a valve cover spacer in. I'll show all these parts here in a minute as we go. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to start with first off with the parts that we're going to use. Some of these parts come from Clegg Machine, and some come from Hesco, also known as Hurley Engine Service. And the reason we had to kind of split it up, Hesco does make a full kit to put the spacer in these, but they're out of stock. But Clegg has them, so I went with the Clegg. So with the Clegg kit, you get the 5/8 inch spacer, billet aluminum. It looks to be very well made, and we'll see how well this goes in. As well as a spacer for the thermostat housing, which you'll need because the way the water net comes out at an angle. If you just space the valve cover up, the valve cover ends up hitting this, so you have to space the thermostat out. So that solves problem number one: get the valve cover up and the thermostat out. Now, if you're doing this on an XJ, that's all you need to do. Space the valve cover, space the thermostat housing. If you're doing this on a TJ or a YJ, where the belt routing comes across by the thermostat housing, you've got to get Hesco's high flow thermostat housing for their aluminum head, and I'll put a link to all these parts in the description. If you notice on this housing, hand me that housing right there. Hold it up here because you got gloves on. Right, up here, up. Okay, so if you notice this housing, it's how it's flush, right? If you compare it to this housing, they machined away in here and then countersunk the bolt hole for the belt to clear once you space it out. And Hesco's ingenious, they ship with the bolt that you need. So the only other thing you'd have to do to put this on with the spacer is also then get about a 1/4 inch longer 5/16 bolt. So that's the parts we're going to use, as well as the cover gasket you will use between this and the head. You use a 91 to 95 gasket, and then for between the valve cover and the spacer, you use the standard 96 and up gasket if you're using the steel valve cover. So we are gonna push parts out of the way. Okay, so obviously the first thing we have to do is get our throttle cable out of the way, and then the 15 bolts come off, and then we can remove the valve cover. Now, since this valve cover's never been run, so all of our spacer washers are still going to remain on the valve cover. We'll just set this aside. And we'll pull off our lower which will soon become our upper gasket, and set it aside. So, next thing I want to do, now that the valve cover's off, we know what we're going to do here. The first thing I want to do at this point is go ahead and change our thermostat housing. So, give me a 19. Yeah. Yep. It should be a 19 and 3/4. Because 19 and 3/4 are the same. I didn't really have that in there tight anyway. Set that aside. Hand me the other thermostat housing. Yep. So we'll do another quick comparison. You can see the difference between the two housings. This is one that came out, this is one that's going in. And these are both HESCO high flow housings where they've been machined out here for better flow. So we'll hang on to this one and use it on another vehicle. Just set that on the bench. That's fine. All right, so we got the thermostat housing off. I got to get the thermostat out. There we go. And we'll clean all this up. And get our new spacer on. So we'll get the spacer and thermostat done first. And normally I would do this with a die grinder and this bristle bit, but I don't have any air on this side of the shop, so okay, so we've got our head face cleaned up, all the silicone, most of the silicone is removed. A few small spots right here. All right, all the silicone's removed. So, I need my spacer. So what we're going to do, of course we have to use 2 gaskets for this. It's going to face on like that. So I'm going to use a Permatex number 4 aviation forma gasket as opposed to using silicone. First thing I'm going to do is put my thermostat back in. There we go. So on the Jeep 4-liter, the gasket actually covers up the lip of the thermostat. And I used to use silicone for these. What I found is And as you saw when I did this one, silicone ends up covering parts of the thermostat, getting behind the thermostat, and it creates a potential for a flow problem. So I don't do that anymore. So I'm going to brush a healthy amount onto this gasket. We're going to let it sit for a minute or two before we put it on. So the way this is going to work is we'll have the gasket on, the spacer will go on, and before I put the spacer on, and actually I'll go ahead and paint this side of the spacer with the same compound. And actually with this form of gasket, if your surfaces are perfect, which on a car they never are, but if your surfaces were perfect, this is all you would have to do. You wouldn't even need a gasket. This stuff is impervious to coolant, motor oil, gasoline, most solvents. However, I have found that chlorinated brake clean will remove it, as well as MEK, which makes it easy for cleanup. So the next time I have to do a thermostat, I pull the old one out, shoot a little brake clean onto, shoot a little bit of brake clean onto my rag, and scrub the old sealant right off. Alright, so that's sealed up, ready to go. And we'll set it there. We'll let those set for a minute or two, and then we'll put it all together. And it doesn't take long to set up, just a couple, maybe a minute or so. Kind of tacks up a little bit. So go ahead and get that gasket in place. All right. And while this one's setting up, I'll go ahead and prep the outer gasket onto the thermostat housing. And I'm not a huge fan of certain brands of gaskets for certain things, but I have found that on a Jeep engine, the Felpro gaskets are actually good quality, so I prefer to use them. But there are certain vehicles that the Felpro gaskets are not good quality, and therefore I won't use them. Usually head gaskets on certain cars. Nissan Z cars, the old Z cars, the Felpro gaskets have a tendency to blow out the fire ring, but a good old plain cardboard gasket, yeah, they make good ones. Get this painted on. I'll let that set for a second. Alright. So this is probably tacked up good. Let me put it in place. Nope, it's not going to hold. Just to hold it in place while we wait on the other gasket to tack up. The thing can see I've got this side of the gasket coated. I'll lay it onto the thermostat housing, put a bolt through it, paint this side of the gasket, and I'll put it all together. That needs to set up a little bit longer. We'll go ahead and paint some of this on the other side. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot, just as long as it's an even coat. Because all we're trying to do is give a little bit extra sealing for any imperfections in the surface area. We'll let that sit for a minute or two. So I'm going to leave it loose for a few minutes before I finally tighten it down. All right, the torque on both these bolts, I should say this bolt and this cap screw, it's 288 inch-pounds or 22 foot-pounds. So I'll bring that one in line, kind of work the lower one up. All right, and that was the hard part. So, now the spacer goes on. We'll get our new gasket out here. And our spacer, I believe, So the heater hose tube coming off the water pump, you'll have to unscrew it just a hair, and because it's a new water pump and new tube, it's got the sealant on it, it's fine. You have to unscrew it just a hair to clear everything. So our new spacer's installed. Our steel cover gasket goes on. The valve cover goes on. Now, 15 screws, or bolts, or cap screws, however you want to refer to it. And they've got to be longer. So I get these from Granger. It's 1/4-20. The original screws are an inch, roughly about an inch long. We've added 5/8 of an inch in here, plus another gasket. So these are an 1.5 inches long. And they fit down just nice. And these will get torqued to 60 inch-pounds. And that's per Clegg engine machine when you're using the spacer, because of the two different gaskets. So it's critical that these are torqued exactly to 60 inch-pounds. Now the steel Jeep valve covers get torqued with the spacer to 60 inch-pounds, and it's kind of in a circular pattern. So we'll start here, 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 and we work our way around circularly. All right, we put our temp sender back in, and I'll put our throttle cable back on. Here's a good close-up look of the thermostat housing with the spacer installed. And you can see how that gives clearance for the belt to run underneath. And obviously I'll double check the torque a couple times to make sure it's stabilized. Here's a good close-up look of how that spacer looks installed. And that's the angle we had to turn the water outlet to clear. So it just clears. I could probably take a little bit more out just to make sure we've got a gap in there. And then of course with the spacer we've got room for our hose now. That's all there is to it. Obviously, if you're doing this on a vehicle that's been run a while, you would use a new upper gasket, as well as replacing all the washers and grommets in the valve cover. This vehicle has not been run since this was built, so I just reused the gaskets and washers and grommets. Doing this, like I said before, will allow the rocker arms to clear the oil baffle. As I said before, the oil baffle system in the 96 to 2006 4-liter is actually a very good design. They came up with it when they had to go to OBD2 for emissions reasons. It does a very good job of separating the oil from out of the air, and therefore you don't get as much combustion of oil or oil blow by onto the filter assembly itself, as long as everything else is working right. And for that, I'll post a link to another video about the vacuum system, the CCV system in Jeeps. I may shoot another video at a later date about that as well. That's all I got for now. If you like this content, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe, hit that bell icon for future notifications. And as always, there's more to follow. Oh, before I forget, don't let your helpers stay up till midnight playing video games when they have to work the next day. That's all I got. Y'all have a good day.